Okay, my name is Gelene. In Human Architecture Journal of the Sociology of Self-Knowledge in 2005, Elena van der Molen talked about the day her mother brought her to the United States from Guatemala, and her mother told her that she was adopted. Even though she knew this since she was a very young age, it was not until she was at the age of 4 that Elena understood what it really meant. Elena was watching the popular show Sesame Street one day and remembered that the episode was about one of the characters giving birth. She specifically remembered that the mother had dark-colored skin, and so did her newborn. Elena immediately went to her mother, who had white skin, and held up her arm next to her and said, "My skin is a different color than yours. Why?" Her mother's reaction was that she was shocked because she thought that Elena would not mention race until she was much older. My topic for today is transracial adoption. And for those of you who don't know, transracial adoption is the adoption of a child that is a different race than that of the adopted parents. Transracial adoption occurs through domestic adoption, such as foster care, and international adoption, which is a child adopted from another country. In JSTOR 2006, there was an increase in discrimination in the adoption process toward the people that wanted to adopt transracially. As a way to take into account for the discrimination and racism, the National Association of Black Social Workers then passed the 1994 Multi-Ethnic Placement Act, which made it illegal for agencies to refuse to place a child with parents of another race. My proposition is that transracial adoption is an effective option for homeless children, and it will not cause the adopted child to have self-esteem challenges and racial identity, but instead cause positive outcomes. First, I'll talk about the pros and cons of transracial adoptions. Some studies that prove that issues with self-esteem and racial identity will not affect the adopted child, and studies that prove that transracial adoption is a positive outcome for society. First, I'm going to talk about the pros and cons. The cons of transracial adoption is that it deprives the child of their culture and heritage. The adopted parents might not make an effort to help their adopted child to learn more of their ethnic culture, which can affect their ability to form racial identity. Adopted parents should be aware that children of racial minority groups develop their sense of racial identity differently than white children, who are typically raised to view themselves as individuals before seeing themselves as part of a racial group. Now, the pros of transracial adoption is that it breaks the traditional family unit. Adopted families embrace their diversity. It also broadens their social network by connecting with people sharing the child's race, and families become culturally experienced. The family experience is more important than growing up in the same race environment, because orphan children are better off receiving care and love from a family unit regardless of skin color. Transracial adoption is a perfect solution for a racially divided world, and it could go a long way towards true integration. Transracial adoption from developing countries provides an excellent opportunity to save an individual from the challenges of an economic disadvantaged environment, which could give them more opportunities than otherwise be available to them. It is also a great way for a childless family to build a family, which could also do some good in the world. Second, studies prove that such as self-esteem and racial identity will not affect the adopted child. In social work, there was a study that compared the self-esteem and racial identity of transracial and interracial adoptees. It was a complex study, but it indicated that there were no differences in overall self-esteem between the sampled transracially and interracially adopted. However, there did appear that there was a difference between the transracial and interracial adoptees with their sense of racial identity. It did cause a bit of a problem because of the families nurturance of the child's Black identity and the child's access to Black role models and peers to the community in the school. And it seemed to be influential in the shaping of the positive racial identity. Therefore, it is all up to parents to be involved in their child's heritage and culture. Also, in The Future of Children in 1993 on the long-term effects of transracial adoption found that after 6 more years of living in their different race home, children became adjusted as well as their same-race adoption counterparts. Thirdly, studies prove that transracial adoption is a positive outcome towards society. In Social Behavior and Personality, an international journal in 2007, studies conducted that mostly in industrialized countries suggest that most people approve of transracial adoption, believing it is a better alternative to outcome home. Also, a sample of 72 Black undergraduate students were surveyed, and the results showed that most of the students approved of transracial adoption and believe that it promotes racial tolerance, and less than 5% believe that transracial adoption could lead to the loss of child's culture. In conclusion, going through the reasons, it shows why racial adoption is an effective option for homeless children and it will not cause the adopted child to have racial identity and self-esteem challenges, but instead cause positive outcomes.
Gesundheit. All right, well, the proposition does get identified in the opening part of the speech. I like the setup that you have with the example. That works pretty well. The explanation about what it was that was voted on in 1994 sounds like it raises an idea about some conflict existing here, that there's disapproval or objection to this. I don't know if that is, it was not clear whether or not that is now a law or if it is just a practice by this one particular organization or just their attitude about this. So that, I think, needed to be clarified a little bit more. The secondary points are laid out, but they're not exactly claims. Most of the time they're just signposts, so it sounds like an informative speech that you're giving us. I'm going to tell you what the pros and cons are. I'm going to tell you that the research says this. You need to make a claim. You need to say that the negatives are outweighed by the positives. You need to say that it is safe to do this, and then show that the research supports that particular point, because they're declarative sentences. It's not an informative presentation. You're making the argument here that there is some point. There's a discussion about racial identity or ethnic culture and racial identity, and you give us a little bit of background on that, but it sounds to me at the end like you're saying that those things were not of critical importance, or they are not undermined by transracial adoptions. So the first question that popped into my head is, why is it important? And it was interesting because you did have an explanation in the speech that suggested that white kids are brought up and they see themselves as being individuals, and that's how they get their identity, and that the other kids, for some reason, get identity through ethnicity. And I wasn't quite clear why that is true. Is that a cultural thing? Is that just the general practice in this culture? Or is it something that is created because of the lack of transracial adoptions or that kind of relationship? So, and why is it important? Because if that's the main objection to transracial adoptions and it's not important, I think that would be a good argument for your side. You did a good job citing your evidence for the most part, although sometimes it sounded like I was getting summaries of quotes instead of getting the quotes themselves, and there were a few places where you were giving me information and it may very well have been quoted material and you're not giving me a source citation on that. You want to be more consistent about that. But I did hear when you presented studies and research that you gave us a source citation on that, although not always the dates. In fact, the only two dates that I heard were 1994 and 1993, so it it sounds like we're talking about a 20-year-old issue here. If this is a more contemporary issue and there's more recent research on this, that would be a valuable thing for us to know about so that we could see that it's important. The presentation is a little problematic. You're doing a lot of reading, and you got a quiet voice. I can hear you, but I think you need to have a little bit more energy to keep the audience going. And like I said, the reading thing is a little bit problematic. You just need to talk to us sometimes. I know you want to get all the information correct, and that seems very important, and I'm not saying that it isn't, but what's more important is that we understand what the argument is, and you have to be able to tell us, here's the point that I'm trying to make, and here are the things that I'm going to use to try and prove that particular point. If you just read information, we're having to figure it out, and you're not making an argument, you're just summarizing information and then letting us choose. You're the one who has to take a position and be a little bit more forceful about it. All right, thank you.